We're on Perik. Okay, we got to Perik Chavtes Pasuk Yud Aleph. Moving right along in Nitzavim. What page? What page? 1086. So we're picking up the fourth line. We're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to the Jewish people, and he says, "I'm going to make a covenant with you." And in Pasuk, fourth line from the top, Pasuk Yidal, La'avracha bevrisa Hashem Elokecha, to bring you through in the covenant of Shem your God, uva also on the curse, Asher Hashem Elokecha korei simcha hayom, which Hashem was making with you today. So first of all, they made a covenant already at the time of when they received the Torah. So why are you making a new covenant? Why are you making a new covenant? And the answer is because they violated the old covenant. When they had the old covenants at Har Sinai, so they violated it by going and worshiping the Egel. And that was a covenant that involved sprinkling blood from the Korban on the Jewish people. They sprinkled blood on them. According to the Ramban, there was another covenant made here with the sprinkling of blood. Different opinions exactly what happened here. But you need a new covenant because you broke the old covenant. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is making a covenant with the people. For what purpose? Leman hakim oscha hayom lo la'am, in order to make you his nation. V'hu yelachal elokim, kasher diber lach, as he spoke to you. V'kasher nishba lavosech la'aram yitzchak Yaakov. What's the covenant? The covenant is the previous pasuk, the previous parsha, that talks about the various calamities and punishments that will happen to the Jewish people if they step out of line. Now, ultimately, we see from here that a punishment is sometimes it's for our good. What's going to maintain our loyalty to God? Remember yesterday we were talking about something bad can happen, and sometimes the bad thing actually turns out to be something good, a blessing. What's it called? It's a blessing in disguise, right? It's like there's Lucy in disguise, and there's a blessing in disguise. So sorry, I had to say that. There's something. What can I do? Okay, yeah, LSD. That's what they said. The Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is LSD. But maybe it is, or maybe it's just a song. But at the end of the day, there's a blessing in disguise. I just heard about there's this kid who was about 3 days before his bar mitzvah. He was going to have his bar mitzvah celebration. He was going to read in the shul and have a kiddush and a whole celebration. And they, page 1086. And they decide they had to take out. All of a sudden, he had an emergency appendicitis, which means he's going to miss his bar mitzvah celebration. He's going to miss miss the kiddush, miss everything. So the kid was upset. His parents were upset. Everybody was upset, and parents had to call everybody to tell them the bar mitzvah is off. And I guess this was pre-WhatsApp days or whatever it is that you do on social media. But so the parents had to tell everybody the bar mitzvah is off. And they took out the appendix, and they discovered inside the appendix there was a malignant tumor. And had they not, then they took out that everything else was okay because they happened to take it out with the appendix. And had they not discovered it, then the kid would have had a bunch bigger problems. So sometimes what seems to be a curse is actually a blessing. So here the Torah is telling you that it's the very punishments that are going to keep us in line. That's what guarantees their survival. Because every time the Jewish people want to get pounded, then we do a little soul searching, and we come back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, where we become more loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's to God. Our loyalty is then what do you call it? It's strengthened because we realize if a kid gets potched by his father, so he knows that he's getting potched for a reason. So if you're getting potched, well, do some soul searching. Why did it happen? What did I do wrong? So usually with the father, you know exactly what you did wrong. When somebody down here goes through some aggravation, so the Gemara says, do some soul searching. What do you think had happened? You lost some money. Maybe you're not spending money. Maybe not giving enough tzedakah. We don't know exactly why. We've spoken about that before. We don't know. We need a prophet to tell you why. But we can make a pretty good educated guess sometimes. The guy bites his tongue. So maybe, he's misusing his speech a little bit. Maybe a little lashon hara, maybe vulgarity, maybe he's insulting people, maybe he's eating non-kosher food. Could be a lot of different possibilities. But at least the soul searching for the punishment forces us to do a little introspection. Number one. Then the Torah says a very puzzling thing, and this is what troubles many people. Because the next pasuk says, pasuk Yud Gimel, 9 lines from the top. V'lo itchem levadchem anochi koreses abrisa zos. Not with you alone am I making this covenant, ve'esa olah hazos, this curse. Ki es asher yeshno po imanu omed hayom lifnei Hashem Elokeinu. It's with those who are here today before God, ve'es asher einenu po imanu hayom, and those who are not here. Now, who isn't here? So the Mepharshim say that refers to future generations. Future generations are bound by that covenant, and according to other Mepharshim, converts. People are going to convert into the Jewish people later on. And the obvious question is like, what are you making a commitment for me for? What's it my fault that some people 2,000 years ago accepted a Torah that says that I can't wear woolen linen, or that I can't eat shellfish because they committed? What makes me committed to that? Why am I committed? So the basic answer is that we'll take a Torah answer. We'll take even an answer from a secular perspective. That's always when somebody challenges your Torah loyalty. Somebody challenges Torah loyalty, you always have to figure out where they're coming from. Somebody says to you, for example, how come religious Jews don't drive on Shabbos? Right? Are you asking me from a religious perspective, or are you asking me from a secular perspective? Because from a secular perspective, it's a completely different answer than a religious perspective. If you ask me from a religious perspective, well, because we believe there's a Torah that came from Sinai, and God said you're not allowed to drive on Shabbos. You ask me from a secular perspective, why don't I drive on Shabbos? I don't feel like it. Which is basically what secular philosophy boils down to. Right? Secular philosophy boils down to if you feel like it, you feel like it. If why don't religious Jews go to the army? You mean from a Torah perspective? What's our objection to the army? From a Torah perspective? I got various reasons. A secular perspective? Like, what the heck? Why should I go to the army? You get killed. Why would I want to go to the army for? So then the counter challenge is, yeah, but don't you feel responsibility? Moral respect? You're talking to me about morals? You mean after you had your first or second abortion? Which morals are you talking to me about? Which morals are you talking about? You're talking to me about morals? Right? Hey, you have your morals, I have my morals, because your morals are whatever you feel like doing with it at any particular time. You don't have moral. It depends where you're coming from. So from a Torah perspective, the Midrash says, all souls were there. Your souls were there, gentlemen. How do you like that? If this sounds familiar, it's because you heard it before, about 2,000 years ago. We had this conversation. Remember I told you that the Gemara says that a wife is a precious gift to her husband? Did we speak about that? The Gemara says, Isha Tova, Matona Tova Labaila. Did you ever hear that? A good wife, the Gemara says, a wife is a good wife. Isha Tova, Matana, it doesn't mean her name is Tova either. It means Isha Tova, Matana, a good wife is a precious gift to her husband. Say, why is she? She's a gift to the husband. Why is she a gift? You know that the Gemara says, you know why? You know why? The Beni Yehoyada explains, Beni Shchai. Yeah, the Beni Shchai. He says that it could very well be this couple was married in a previous incarnation. And the husband messed up. And he had to come back into this world to get it right again. His wife got it right the first time around. But she's brought back to help him get it right. She doesn't have to be here. She's just a gift. She's a gift. She doesn't have to be here. She's a gift to the husband. You have to remember that. That's why a lot of those conversations you have with your wife, it sounds familiar. We once talked about this before, in a previous incarnation, maybe. Did you ask me for money in a previous incarnation? And I said, no. What didn't you get? What wasn't clear then? And so the women have to be tactful. That's never something you bring up, ladies, in an argument. Ladies, never bring that up in an argument. Well, listen, I don't really have to be here, It's only because of you, try to leave that out of the Yeah, a guy once said, well, it seems that the lean seems to be on men. Men have a lot more trouble getting it right than women do. That's a fact, because women are better. There, I've said it. Women are better. And they're more spiritual, they're better, and everything else, just except the driving. Other than that, they're better. And so the Torah said, that's, your neshama was there, my neshama was there, our neshamas were there. So we accept it. The question doesn't, according to that, the question doesn't begin. How could they accept it for us? They didn't. Our neshamas were there. Our souls were there. We accepted the Torah. That's from a Torah. That's from a Torah perspective. But there is another Torah perspective, even from a secular perspective, which is, how come I'm bound? Everybody in the United States right now is bound by a treaty that was made 70 years ago. Why are we bound by a treaty that Harry Truman made with whoever it was, or a Roosevelt made with it? Why are we bound by the answer is, you're citizens of America. As citizens of the country, you're bound by your political leaders and your representatives, aren't you? Every country in the world works that. There's a treaty between this one and that one and the other one. And the treaty bounds, unless somebody breaks the treaty, then you have what's called war. That's what happens when you break treaties. I heard about these guys were playing Risk. You played Risk, right? Oh, it's a demon at Risk, especially when the other guy wasn't looking. Take off a couple, knock off a couple. So we're, what do you call, we're playing, these guys are playing Risk. And two guys made a treaty between each other to attack the third guy. So they made a treaty till they knocked the third guy out. You've been there, you've done that. And all of a sudden, Reuven and Shimon made a treaty to knock out Levi. And all of a sudden, Reuven, on his turn, he decides to attack Shimon. And Shimon says, hey, we had a treaty. So Reuven said to them, World War II started with a broken treaty. Spin the dice. That's how war begins. But the treaty binds everybody else, binds the future generations. We're all bound. So we understand that concept exists. We understand from a secular perspective that the concept of future generations being bound by what was committed by somebody else, we understand that. So we shouldn't have any problem at all over here. If the Torah says, well, your ancestors committed, they made a treaty, they made a pact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a bris, a covenant. So if they made the pact, we're bound by it. We shouldn't have any problem because we say that in the world all the time, just from a secular perspective. And at a deeper level, if you have a problem with it, our neshamas were there. That's what the Mefarshim say. Okay, then it says like this. Torah says, and I want to show you an interesting piece of Gemara today. Torah says, where is it? Yeah. Ki atem yadatem, pay attention carefully. Ki atem yadatem es asher yeshavnu be'eretz Mitzrayim. You know that we dwelled in the land of Egypt, 5 lines from the bottom. Ves asher avarnu bekerev hagoyim asher avartem. And we passed through those for the non-Jewish nations. Vatiru es shikutzeim ves giluleim. You saw their various idols. Eitz va'evan kesef ezav asher mem. And Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, listen, I'm nervous because, you have a background over there. You were influenced, you were exposed to Egyptian culture. How long ago did that take place, gentlemen? How long ago did that take place? 40 years ago. You're still worried about, we've been in the desert for 40 years. You're still worried about something that we saw 40 years ago? What's the answer? Yes. The answer is yes, because certain things in life make deep impressions. There's something called subliminal suggestion. You ever hear of subliminal suggestion? So they used to do this. Now this was already illegal by the time I was growing up, but I know that in the early days, back in, I don't know if it was the 50s, when you go to a movie theater, if you watch a movie, the way a movie moves is a bunch of individual frames that are flying past you, and then it creates an impression of motion. So what they would do is they would take one frame in a movie. They would put something like a bottle of 7-Up or Milk Duds. And as you're watching it, you don't even know that you saw it because this movie is one frame in it, but you don't even know that you saw it. The effect was so powerful that the next thing you know, half the theaters out in the what do you call it, buying the Milk Duds. In the movie theaters, they always had that box of Milk Duds, which you can't get that size anywhere else in the world, except in the theater. It's twice the size, 4 times the price. And everybody would be, why are you buying Milk Duds? Because the power of subliminal suggestion was so powerful they made it illegal. Because they felt that the consumers are at such a disadvantage that they made it illegal. Movie theaters cannot do that. They kind of slip in that frame because you're being affected by something that you have no control over. Very, very powerful effect. So So when people, I put on my tefillin today, and I didn't feel anything. Yeah, you also didn't feel anything when you took vitamins. But you took your vitamins, didn't you? Take your vitamins, because you know that one way or another, that's having some sort of an effect on you. Other drugs that you take, you do feel the effect. Codeine, yeah. That's the only benefit of pain is if they ever tell you have to take codeine. But other things, you don't feel the effect so quickly. So why are we doing it? We understand that the same way there could be a subliminal effect, there could also be an effect. You put on your tefillin, that did something to your neshama this morning. You're wearing your tzitzis, that's doing something to your neshama. You learn a word of Torah, that's having an effect on you. I always use the example of my son who went to yeshiva. And with a yeshiva with 600 males in a dormitory with 600 males between the ages of 18 and 22, and never once in 4 years was there a fist fight. Can you imagine? Now switch any other nationality, right? It wasn't Jewish from kids, it was Italians, right? How long would it take for the fist fight, and how many people would it take? 2 Italians were in a dormitory, and within 10 minutes there was a fist fight, right? Any nationality you substitute. Put in a couple of, why? What happened to them? How did it happen? And if you look at even the secular state schools in Israel, unfortunately, where the kids are from secular families, do you know that they have metal detectors? They have to take away, the weapon of choice is plastic box cutters. They once did a survey in the state school that 33% of the kids are carrying these plastic box cutters, and of those 33%, 50% of those 33% said they're carrying it in self-defense. And that includes teachers. If you go to a frum school, a frum cheder, about the worst thing that happens is the kid refuses to bench. He calls out the answer without raising his hand. So, where is that discipline coming? The answer is that when we're doing, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Don't you ever wonder, what are we doing now? Again, I got to put on tefillin. I just did it yesterday. I just put on my tefillin yesterday. Why am I got to do it today and I've got to do it tomorrow also? The answer is every time we do a mitzvah, it's having an effect on us. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, 40 years ago in Egypt, you saw idol worship, you were involved in idol worship. I don't know what residual effects there are, but something may have stayed in there. And it's a very, very difficult thing for a person to get rid of it. I was a kid in camp. I was about 12 years old. And the older group was playing a baseball game. And I still remember the guy's name. I remember the counselor hit the ball past the outfielders, and he's rounding second. He's going to stretch it into a triple. And I'm a little kid. I'm a 12-year-old, impressionable 12-year-old kid. As he slid into third base, the throw came in. The third baseman tagged him. And as the counselor slid into third base, he called himself out at third base as he slid in. And I was a little kid. My first reaction was, oh no, don't do that. First of all, you never call yourself out. You get up and you argue. And then afterwards, I was like, wow, he called himself out. And I wouldn't even have a Havamina. He called himself out. I don't remember the game. I don't remember who won. I still have a picture in my mind from when I'm 12 years old of the counselor sliding in, calling himself out. Because it leaves an impression. And there are negative impressions, there are positive impressions. I had another example here. There was we had a guy, this is unbelievable. We had a guy, 2 guys came to Ohr Somayach years ago. 2 guys came here on a summer program, like a 3-week program, 4-week program, 19-year program. I don't remember what it was. We have long programs here, by the way. You think you're going anywhere? No, you're staying right here. I also came on a 2-week program. Look what happened to me. So these 2 guys came, very similar background, 2 American guys, similar background, similar secular homes. They came here. At the end of the summer, one of the guys decided, at the end of the program, he decides going to continue on to college, is what his thing. And his friend decided to stay on for a couple more months. So one of the rabbis here asked him, What happened? Why did he decide to leave and you decided to stay? So he said, look, we come from similar backgrounds. We come from, everything is the same. Neither of us kept Shabbos, kasher, totally secular homes. So the only difference that I could think of is when my grandfather was religious. And when I would go to visit my grandfather, I would go with him to shul. And when he put on his tallis, he wrapped me in his tallis. So when I walked into the Beis Medrash here at Ohr Somayach, was the old Beis Medrash. When I walked into the old Beis Medrash, the smell of the Beis Medrash reminded me of my grandfather's tallis. I loved my grandfather. He died when I was 9 years old. I loved my grandfather. I decided I want to stay around. That's the effect. That's the effect of what happened. So Moshe Rabbeinu is very concerned. Moshe Rabbeinu is very concerned. You were there, and it may have had a very negative effect on you. Now, if you look at the next pasuk, at pasuk 16. So it says, what's going to happen? You're going to see, and I want to read you a piece of Gemara here. Vatiru es shikutzeim ves giluleim. How does he translate it in the Art Scroll? They're abominations and detestable idols. Eitz va'evan, wood and stone. Kesef v'zav asher imahem. The silver and gold that are with them. Now, Rashi points out that it means the wooden and the wooden and stone idols, they left those out in the open. Gold and silver idols that they kept in the back room somewhere locked up. Even idols, you want to make sure gold is gold at the end of the day. We're not going to leave them out in public, So the gold idols and the silver idols that they kept in the back room. That's how Rashi explains it. Okay. Others explain, what's the temptation here? You saw these pagans. You saw them worshiping idols, and you saw kesef v'zav asher imam. You saw that they were prospering. And you came to the conclusion that why are these Gentiles prospering? They're prospering because they worshiped idols. That's why they made the gold and the silver. And that's a temptation for any of us. Whoa, here I am. I'm learning in Kollel and not doing so well. These guys are worshiping idols and they're living the life and they're gold and silver. That could become a temptation for somebody. And therefore, Moshe Rabbeinu is concerned. Now, I want to read you a piece of Gemara here. Listen to this. The Gemara says there was a man named Zunin. Zunin was not Jewish. And he once confronted Rabbi Akiva. He said to Rabbi Akiva, look, Libi v'libcha yodea, we both know that there's nothing to idol worshiping. We both know it. We know it doesn't have any real effect. He says, yet we see people who walk into the pagan house of worship where they have idols. We see them walk in either wounded or sick, and they come out healed. Throw away your crutch. They come out healed. My timer. How do you explain that, Rabbi Akiva? You claim idol worship is nothing. We both know it's nothing. We both know it's useless. So how is it that people walk in, they can be sick, they have a disease, they go into the idol, and they come out and they're healed? How do you explain such a thing? So listen what Rabbi Akiva told him. Rabbi Akiva said, let me give you an analogy. He says he had a guy in town, and everybody used to give him their money without witnesses. They would, entrust him as a watchman. They would give him money to watch. They would give him money to guard. And they trusted him so much they would give it to him without witnesses. One guy used to insist on having witnesses. One guy said, listen, I'm not giving you the money. Everybody trusted this guy. What do you call a guy where you deposit money? What do you, a bank? I don't even know what you call him in English. A trustee. And everybody was willing to give, here, Sam, here's $10,000, just guard it for me. I'll come back out. And everybody trusted him, and he was loyal. Nobody ever had any complaints. There was one guy who refused to do that. He always used to deposit money deposit money by him, but he always had witnesses because he didn't want to take any chances. One day, this guy deposited his money, but he forgot to use witnesses. The guy who always used witnesses, one day, he did not use witnesses. So this wife came to the guy, came to the trustee, and she said, let's deny it when he comes back. They have a perfect plan. The guy's going to say, let me have my money. He says, well, do you have witnesses? Where are your witnesses? He says, I don't have witnesses. What do you mean you don't have witnesses? You always have witnesses. So now they've got the upper hand on this guy. They've got a good possibility to rip the guy off. So his wife said, let's cheat him. Let's deny that he ever gave us the money. So the husband said to the wife, because this fool did something inappropriate, we should lose our loyalty? We should lose our faithfulness? And I was saying, what's going to happen? He's going to yell, we did. He gave it to us. We didn't give it. Everybody else is going to see that we are people who all of a sudden there is certain amount of lack of trust. Why, we're going to lose our loyalty to you understand what's happening here? We're going to lose our loyalty. Our reputation is going to be tarnished if we take it up with this guy by trying to cheat him. So Rabbi Akiva said, when a person goes through suffering, particularly physical suffering, illness, the illness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sends on a person, when God sends an illness, he invokes an oath on the disease. And he says to the disease or to the wound, you're going to leave on a certain day through a certain person, a doctor perhaps, at a certain time with a certain medication. That means when a person gets an illness, and this is very encouraging for somebody who Chas v'Shalom is suffering from an illness, that there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu invokes an oath. And he says, on a certain day, through a certain doctor, through a certain medication, I'm invoking an oath, you're going to leave. And then the day comes. And what did this fool do on that particular day? He happened to walk into a house of idol worship. So now what should happen? Because this fool did something silly, and then people are going to think that the idols have a power to cure him, therefore the illness should go and lose its loyalty to the oath. So Rabbi Akiva said he happened to hit a home run. He happened to walk into the idol on the very day that the thing was meant to come out. On that very day, he went into the oath. So what should we do? Now break the entire loyalty of the oath? We're going to leave. People will think that and it's based on a pasuk, by the way. It's based on a pasuk. And people will think that the idol has power. Listen, you want to make mistakes, Kosh Baruch Hu lets people make mistakes. You can read, the data could be read in different, you can interpret data in more than one way. You want to interpret it to make mistakes, Kosh Baruch Hu leaves it open to us to make mistakes. But understand that, and it should be very encouraging if a person's ever suffering from some sort of illness, a person should realize that there is a timeline. Not only there's a timeline, he could even get rid of it earlier if he accumulates various merits. If he does tshuva, if he behaves, he gets tzedakah, learns Torah, whatever it is. But a person has to know that there is a cutoff point. Yeah, somebody had a question back there. Go ahead. So there is an opinion that there is a certain deceptive prosperity that comes from it. But there would have been rain anyway. You could have davened for rain. You could have davened also. The idol worship, you worship the idols in order to maintain free choice. So then there was some sort of effect that came about from the idols. And there certainly was a spiritual high in the original idol worship. Eventually that all left and the people were worshiping the idols. The Gemara says they're worshiping the idols only as a form of tradition. But there was certainly a spiritual high for that's why the Gemara, I told you, the Gemara says that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the drive to worship idols was removed by the men of the Great Assembly. It was such an overwhelming drive. It was such a powerful drive, which something we can't relate to. What drive is there in worshiping idols? What kind of powerful drive? The answer is that the physical idol was only a symbol of something higher that they had some ability to tap into, which again, we can't even relate to it. We can't even relate to it because the men of the Great Assembly removed that idol, that Yetzer Hara. It's like we can't relate to the sensation of heroin unless person has actually experienced it, which I don't recommend. Not that I've experienced it, by the way. I mean, I used to deal, but I don't. I listen to Parnosa's Parnosa. Don't knock it, but I don't recommend it. But if you'd ask somebody, what is heroin like? How could they possibly? Well, it's just like marshmallow fluff on a soft roll, but different. You can't possibly, like people say, what's skydiving like? What's it like? Jumping up and down on a bed, but just a little different. Okay. Somebody else had a question. Yeah. Kostas, yeah.
But you already answered it. I was going to say, if there's a certain cutoff, then why do we pray for someone to be healed? But you said that.
They could actually bring it about. That's a merit. They could bring it about sooner. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, watch this. Moshe Rabbeinu then goes and what's he concerned about? So the Torah says, take a look. What pasuk are we on here? Where's it? We're at 9. Oh, here it is. I don't want to skip it. I don't want to skip anything here because there are a lot. Each pasuk here is Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, Pen yesh bachem. First of all, he says, we're worried that you were affected and you're going to get involved in idol worship. Then 2 lines from the bottom. Pen yesh bachem isho isha. Perhaps there's among you a man or a woman. O mishpacha, a family. O shevet, or even a tribe. Asher levovo pone hayom me'ima Hashem Elokeinu. Whose heart is inclined away from God. Leleches lavod es Elohe hagoyim ahem. To go and worship those idols. Watch. Make sure you look at the words now. Pen yesh bachem shoresh pore rosh vilana. Maybe there is, I love the ArtScroll translation here. There is a root flourishing with gall and wormwood. That means what we would call a rotten egg among you, who is not only rotten, but has the ability to influence others. Not only I'm worried that you've influenced, I'm worried there may be somebody around you who's so bad that he's going to try to influence others. And not only that, gentlemen, now that we're in this season, what's the thing that we do that can help us to overcome? Obviously, we're in the, it's like the guy holding up on the first day of Elul. They talk about a guy who's holding up a sign at the first day of Rosh Chodesh Elul, and a guy's holding up a sign that says, "Repent and beat the Yom Kippur rush." Right? We're in the series. We're in the tshuva, the period of tshuva. What's the symbol of the month? What physical symbol do we relate to in this month? The shofar, of course, the shofar. The sound of the shofar, which I told you that the various sounds of the shofar is meant to be a person who's in pain, a person who's crying, in repentance. So I told you, if you drop, there are 3 sounds from the shofar. There's the basic 3 sounds, tkiya, shvarim, trua, tkiya. So if you imagine somebody dropping a bowling ball on their foot, what sound would you expect to hear? The first sound, ouch? Ouch? I don't think it would be ouch.
Scream.
Yeah, right. The first sound when a person drops a 16-pound bowling ball on their foot is, right? Oh! Right? Then he, oh! Those are the sounds. Right? For those who have ever witnessed somebody dropping a bowling ball on their foot, isn't that what happens? Right? What are the sounds of the show? That's the sound. It's like the sound of tears. But the sound of the shofar itself, we have a mitzvah to blow the shofar. The mitzvah to blow the shofar. The sound of the shofar, remember we're talking about subliminal suggestion? Subliminal suggestion. There's a penetration for the sound of the shofar that actually arouses us to do tshuva. How does it work? I don't know. I don't even know how antibiotics work. I've always wondered, how does that antibiotic know to go to my toe? I never got this straight. Never got this quite straight. How does he know? Okay, the shofar, the sound of the shofar penetrates. It motivates us to do tshuva. So you could have somebody who's a rotten egg. He's got the potential to affect other people negatively. Is there any hope for such a person? Yeah, he could do tshuva. Symbolized by what? By the shofar. Take a look at these 3 or 4 words, gentlemen. Shoresh, first 4 words on page 1088. Shoresh, Pore, Rosh, Vilana. The first letter of Shoresh is a shin. Pore. Everybody see that on 1088? Second is a pei. Third letter is a resh. The 4th letter is a vav. Rearrange those letters. What do you get? Shofar. You get the shofar. A person could be, you could be almost virtually hopeless. The shofar could turn it all around. But it's not just the shofar. It's obviously what the shofar stands for. It's the idea that I realize, you know what? There's work to do. As my wife said when I walked in the first time and I met her the first time, shidduch.
There's work to do.
The first time my wife, she told me, I think after we were engaged, maybe even after we were married, I don't remember. She said to me when the first time I walked in, she said, I like him, but there's a lot of work to do. She said that. Now, don't ask me what I said, but she said that. So at the end of the day, I told you when my wife doesn't like my tie or something, I said, don't criticize my choices. You were one of them. So, there is a defense over here. So it evens out.
Said earlier that she was given to you as a gift.
Yeah, well, yeah. But somehow she's given to me as a gift, but it's cost me more cash and gifts for her. Somehow it doesn't even out. That's why the women are always remind you about the anniversary. Who gets the anniversary gift? Yeah, somehow there's an uneven distribution over here. So now one more point. And the worst part is I buy my wife a new fridge. We need a new freezer. Buy a new freezer, 3,000 shekels, whatever it cost. Came with a free pen. All she was talking about for a week, the pen, the free pen. It happens. And what breaks? The freezer breaks. The pen stays around. If it would be the other way around, be okay. Let the pen break, not the freezer. Okay. Now watch this. One more point, and then we stop. When this guy, this rotten egg, hears the curses from the previous Parsha, all the calamities of disloyalty, and he's confident in his heart, and he says, Shalom Yili, I'll be okay. I'll follow the desires of my heart. Hashem will not forgive him. Who are we talking about over here? And this is a very, very common symptom. The Mefarshim say there are certain people who think that, when you play cards, sometimes you say, deal me out of this hand. I'm not in on this hand. There are certain people who think you can tell you about Yiddishkeit. Person says, listen, I never committed to be religious. Those guys in Mea Sharm and those guys in Bnei Brak and those guys in Lakewood, you accepted the commitment, and therefore you've got responsibility. I never accepted the commitments. I'm out. I can eat what I want. Deal me out of this one. I'm not getting reward. I'm not getting punishment. I'm out. He follows the desires of his heart. Lo Yova Hashem Slach. Hashem will forgive a person. You didn't have a choice. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says you're born against your will, and you die against your will, and a person is Jewish against his will, unless he converts. But once you're in, you're in. And you're born Jewish. You got all these self-hating Jews in the world. Guys like Bernie Sanders and these guys who, Tom, what's his name? The writer, Thomas Friedman. Who, the last thing they want is to be Jewish, clearly. The last thing they want is to be Jewish. But you haven't got a choice. You are Jewish. As Rav Weinbach said, that you could try to hide it. Somehow the anti-Semites always, Jews change their names. Says Rabbi Weinbach used to say, the anti-Semites always find you. Nothing's going to help you. Change your name again. Nothing helps you. And as he used to put it, you could change your Moses, but you can't change your noses, right? And one way or another, they're going to fish us out. And so the Torah comes along and says there's a famous frightening story from the Vilna Gaon. Not my line. Rabbi Weinbach used to say it's an old line. You can change your Moses, you can't change your noses. And there's a famous story of the Vilna Gaon. There was a Jewish apostate. A guy embraced Christianity, and he met the Vilna Gaon. And he came into the Vilna Gaon, and at a certain point, the Vilna Gaon put out a cup of tea or something. So the guy picked it up and he started drinking. So Vilna Gaon says, you didn't make a bracha. This guy says, make a bracha? I worship idols. I commit adultery. I've done everything in the book. I worship. Make a bracha? The Vilna Gaon says, listen, bro, for idol worship, you're going to be punished. for adultery, you're going to be punished. You're also going to be held accountable for every time you didn't make a bracha, didn't put on tzitzis, didn't wear tefillin, a tray for. There's no like, okay, these I'm absolved of because I'm doing worse of it. It doesn't work that way. There's accountability all the way across. There's accountability. And so the Torah is telling you, a guy says, no, I'm out. Oh, you think so? You think so? Oh, no, you're not. There's no such thing as deal me out. We weren't given the choice. There was a covenant that was made at Sinai. We weren't given that choice, and therefore, a person has to understand. On the other hand, the same way that there's accountability for every negative, and we know that the reward for mitzvahs is paid at a higher rate than the punishment for averas. So every time you did make a bracha, you're going to be rewarded. And every time you ate kosher food because it was inconvenience and you drove a little further to get to the kosher restaurant, or you didn't eat non-kosher food because there was nothing available, so you ate an apple on the airplane when they didn't have your kosher meal, you get tremendous reward for that because the midah tova is meruba, midah pras. We always have to remind ourselves that. And you did put on tefillin and you wore tzitzis and you davened and you learned Torah. You have to remember, it's not just the devil with the pitchfork who's hunting for us over here. To the contrary, Kodesh Baruch Hu would rather reward us. And if a person is loyal, does a mitzvah, for every mitzvah a person does, there's going to be a payment. All right, see you tomorrow.